Hello.
Hi, back again, twice within the space of a few hours.
Yeah.
So this is our actual regular session update. First of all, we've got to say a huge thank you to Stavros,
Absolutely amazing.
the Spinning Greek, for an enormous box of VCLT, which John and I have divided out between us.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, I think next session
Yeah.
we'll actually hear some of the music.
Yeah. And we need to get ourselves together to think about reciprocation
Indeed.
as well. Yeah, so I started off with a track by Elvin Jones from an album called On the Mountain, which I think came out in between his period with Blue Note and before he moved on to Vanguard. And this is just a trio with his rhythm section, really, from the band he had on a lot of the Blue Note records, which is with Gene Perler and Jan Hammer, actually. And it's a very unusual track for Elvin. It's almost like a kind of very mellow track, and I played the track called On the Mountain itself. It's a very nice record, actually. Kind of uncharacteristic playing from Elvin, but some good stuff.
Well, I followed this up with a Jan Hammer album and track, and this is the album, as you can see. It's called Oh Yeah, very Lichtenstein-esque cover. This was just from, I think, a year later, 1976, but a very different sound, very sort of Mahavishnu orchestra-esque, I would say. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, with a lot of violin, synth, drums, some incredible drumming, actually. Who's the drummer? Tony Smith and Fernando Saunders on the bass. We listened to a track called Magical Dog. And this has just been reissued, I believe. This is the original, but it's just come out.
For some classic fusion, some classic jazz funk, and I think if you've seen our videos, you probably know we're quite big fans. Well, I'm particularly quite a big fan of Patrice Rushen. And played the track off her this is the last album she made for Fantasy before she moved over to Elektra, and played the track Roll with the Punches, which has some, it's just a full-on kind of jazz funk track.
It is.
Very energetic.
Yeah.
Great drumming from James Gadsden.
Yeah. Followed that with another jazz funk selection, possibly actually on reflection not the best from this album. The album's called See the Light. We listened to the title track. I actually think the track Zayas is the best tune on this album. But yeah, a couple of Eddie Russ albums have recently been reissued on Soul Brother Records. So yeah, not available for a long time, but if you want the vinyl, pick them up, they sound good.
Definitely. Carrying on in a similar vein, went to Eddie Henderson with one of his albums he made for EMI, for Capitol, and played his version of Butterfly, which is of course the Herbie Hancock tune, which there's lots of versions of, and this is one which is a probably much more up-tempo, funky version.
Yeah.
The album's called Mahal, and it's got Paul Jackson, M2 May, and quite a people like. It's a good album.
And Herbie.
And Herbie, of course,
Yeah.
playing on his own track.
Well, I played a track from an album that I had as a teenager and then got stolen out of a whole bunch of all the earliest records I bought, got stolen out of my parents' garage, along with my comics collection. I've never quite got over it. But anyway, this is Chicago's, well, it's a kind of Chicago's greatest hits album, and we listened to 25 or 624 with the incredible guitar playing of Terry Kath.
Jimi Hendrix was a big fan of Terry Kath. Then we moved into a kind of British jazz section and played a track off Michael Gibbs. Well, I'd say British. Michael Gibbs came from Zimbabwe, or Rhodesia, as it was called that. This was his first album he made for D-Ram. Pretty rare, actually, now in its original form, although it's been reissued a couple of times. Played the first track, which is called Family Joy Oh Boy, which has an amazing trumpet solo from Kenny Wheeler, who's a great Canadian jazz trumpeter who spent a lot of time in the UK, and a great guitar solo by Chris Spedding. Who was
Chris Spedding. Of motorbiking fame.
Motorbiking fame.
Well,
Sex Pistols fame, of course.
That's true. We then listened to my one and only Record Store Day purchase, which I didn't purchase on Record Store Day, but it was released as part of Record Store Day, and that is the Gordon Beck Trio an album from 1969, just been reissued, called Gyroscope, which featured Gordon Beck on the piano, Jeff Klein on the bass, Tony Oxley on the drums, who was the same drummer as the album we just listened to
on the
from John.
Michael Gibbs album as well.
And I was reminiscing about a gig that I saw in Swiss Cottage in London when I was 11, where both Gordon Beck and a sax player called Don Weller were performing, and I was telling John what a transformative experience it was. For some reason I kind of was completely hypnotised by the music that afternoon. Never been the same.
Don Weller, of course, had a very big white beard. Did he have a white beard?
I can't remember if he had a white beard. He probably had a beard.
Yeah, but maybe it was black then.
Yeah.
Staying with the Brits, Neil Ardley, who was another arranger and musician, composer who worked with big bands in the UK. This was from an album called Kaleidoscope of Rainbows, which came out in the mid to late 70s. It was produced by Paul Buckmaster, who of course worked with Miles Davis and all kinds of people. Actually, he was a very famous arranger. And played the track Rainbow 2, which featured Dave McRae, later of Matching Mole, or actually previously of Matching Mole, actually, 76. Nice album, Kaleidoscope. He also did an album with John Martin, which came out after this one.
Which I've never heard about.
Yeah, which was
Rather intriguing.
Almost like a kind of concerto for John Martin, actually.
Carrying on with the British Connection, a 7-inch that came...
We could be celebrating the royal wedding, couldn't we?
Well, we are going to in a second with my selection after
oh,
this.
that's true.
Which, both John and I subscribed to the Wax Poetics magazine. And there was a period where you used to get a free 7-inch. And this one was High Diver by Brian Bennett and Alan Hawkshaw, which was I imagine a piece of library music, but a very very funky, moody, and sounding great piece of library music. Yeah,
definitely good.
Brian Bennett, of course, the ex-drummer of the Shadows.
That's right. My record store day purchase was something I was very excited about, and actually, even though record store day was absolutely madness in West London, actually, I've got 2 shops near where I lived, and there were queues all the way up the road. But I finally got in and got a copy of the soundtrack to The Friends of Eddie Coyle, written by Dave Grusin, who's obviously famous later on for his fairly kind of gentle jazz funk records. But this is a very interesting record with kind of picks up, as well as picking up on what was going on with the kind of jazz and funky stuff at the same time. Also kind of had a lot of kind of almost avant-garde percussion on it. Amazing recording and a great band. Yeah, great film as well if you haven't seen the film.
Yeah, brilliant film and great book.
Great book.
By, is it George V. Higgins?
George V. Higgins, yeah. And great also sleeve notes from a friend of mine, David Toop, who's a well-known music writer in here as well. So highly recommended. Sounded amazing.
Not a well-known lover of Dave Grusin.
He seems to be.
He is now.
Yeah.
So this was our tribute to the royal wedding. It was the Sons of Kemet, Your Queen is a Reptile. This is Shabaka Hutchins, one of his many spin-off groups. And this is out on Impulse. Our cat's just Snuffkin is here. And we listened to a sort of Nyabingi drumming groove. He's got Seb Roachford and Tom Skinner on drums, and actually Moses Boyd appears on other tracks. And it's a sort of tuba, sax and twin drum lineup. Every track, it's a double album, great pressing. Every track starts with My Queen Is, and we listen to My Queen Is Nanny of the Maroons.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Staying on the same label, but going back over 50 years, went for Yusef Lateef's album 1984, which was in fact released in 1964, I think, 65. He made a whole string of very nice records with Impulse, and including
We're still in business, John.
Including the Golden Flute and various other things. This is from an album with Mike Knock on piano, Reggie Workman on bass, and James Black on drums, and played the track called Warm Fire.
Yeah.
Nice record.
Very nice.
All recommended.
Beautiful sounding. Something about the tone of the sax put me in mind of Lester Young, and we listened to Blue Lester from this Prez the Complete Savoy Sessions album, which not been the finest recording as it was recorded in sort of 1946 or something. But
sounded great though.
Yeah, his tone is just and so sweet. His playing.
So I'm stroking a cat here.
Yeah.
Went back briefly into the UK and went for Victor Feldman, who was an amazing character. Actually, somebody should write his life story. I think he was performing live as a almost like a kind of virtuoso drummer when he was 10 in London, and then moved on and started playing vibes. Started playing piano. He went to the States, worked with Miles, worked with worked with Scott LaFaro, got Scott LaFaro going, worked with Miles. Also then went on and played with, he's probably playing on half your record collection actually. Also played with almost every Steely Dan album. Amazing character. So he played vibes, piano, drums. And this is from a big band album he made in London in the mid-50s. And with a band including Tubby Hayes and Ronnie Scott. And it's kind of fairly straight ahead. Kind of big band music, but nice sounding.
Really nice.
Amazing character, Victor Feldman. Look him up online and find all about him.
Yeah. Staying in the UK, Steve Winwood's second solo album, I think it was, which is called Arc of a Diver. And we listened to the track which opens side 2, Spanish Dancer, which apparently was very influential on Mark Hollis from Talk Talk. And yeah, it just sounded great. It's a lot of synths and electronics, but yeah, as John was saying, very organic, very kind of warm and natural sound. Very cheap to find this album, and yeah.
In fact, all his albums are pretty easy to find, aren't they? Actually?
Yeah,
great stuff. Had a slight interregnum, and so I tried to play a CD and it didn't work. So,
yes.
So we jumped over the CD and went to Funkadelic, which hasn't much to do with apart from the keyboard Bernie wore out, I guess, with Stevie Wonder, and played the track Balance. This was from the Funkadelic album America Eats Is Young, and it was kind of like, it was a double album. It was almost, people were talking about it at the time as being almost like their Sgt. Pepper's, really. Even more psychedelic than usual. Kind of lots of different kind of styles of music on here as well, actually. Yeah, and the track Balance has got some amazing drumming from, I think, either Tyrone Lampkin or one of those guys, actually. But really good stuff. Good album, actually. Nobody talks about this album very much.
No.
Actually.
We moved from there. I think it was the slightly psychedelic thing that I was hearing, to a double anthology album, which I picked up in our local market for £5, which is pretty cheap. Todd Rundgren. She sounds, lots of great tunes from really his Runt days up until the early 80s, and we listened to a track from 1973 that just sounded so far ahead of its time, called Tiny Demons, which I wasn't familiar with. I'm not even sure what album it's
I'm not sure what album it's from either.
But great tune.
Very good tune. And kind of connection with Todd and Prince, really. I always think Prince has so many influences, but Todd must have been an influence on him, I'm sure. And played Love Sexy, which I think was probably his last all solid, all good album all the way through. Actually, Rainbow Children's pretty good as well. But yeah, so this is his one of 80s albums. Played Anastasia off here, actually. Something about the guitar sound on the Todd thing reminded me of Prince. Really.
Yeah, and this, I've just picked this up on CD. I don't think it's out on vinyl yet. This is the new Janelle Monáe album, which is called Dirty Computer. Actually, the first track has Brian Wilson on it, which is amazing. She is a direct antecedent of Prince, no doubt about it. She's definitely keeping a flame burning, I think, and obviously Prince was on her last album. we listened to a beautiful track called Stevie's Dream, which also appears to have been recorded at Stevie Wonder's Wonderland studio, and he seems to be involved in it in quite a deep way. Fantastic album, very subversive album. Yeah, really worth listening to.
She's definitely the real thing, I think.
She's the real thing, yeah.
Talking about the real thing, I have to congratulate Kendrick Lamar on winning Pulitzer Prize, which was deserved. I think he should have probably won it for this album, though. I mean, Damn, it's a great album, but Pimp a Butterfly is really quite something, I think, actually. And played this at sessions before, but this time played the track. I can't remember which track I did play, actually. Hood Poetics off here. Hood Politics off here. Great sounding vinyl on this record. Really is a spectacular bit of mastering.
Another new album. This is the new double vinyl album from Michel Ndegeocello. Also fantastic pressing. This is a album really of unusual covers called Ventriloquism. We listened to her version of it's the Prince track actually, isn't it? Waterfalls, but as covered by TLC.
Yeah.
Also has a kind of amazing cover version of Atomic Dog by George Clinton. It's got some kind of unusual 80s covers, Sensitivity, which I think was Ralph Trevant or somebody. But yeah, great. I mean, as ever, a completely original take. And a completely original sound again.
She'd been listening a lot to Neil Young's Harvest before making a record, and you can hear the stripped down sound of Harvest on a lot of the tracks, actually. Then went to play kind of something that came out in the early 2000s? Yeah. From I'm pretty sure she was a UK singer called Ryan Benson, and she made an album called Gold Coast, which had a whole host of American kind of soultronic kind of stars on it, really. People like James Poyser, Pino Palladino, various others, and played the track off this called Shake It Away, which is just kind of quite a nice mid-tempo modern soul record, I guess, actually. She unfortunately faded away without any kind of achieving any. Mark was saying this record must have cost a fortune to make, so it's got a lot of people on it.
Yeah.
But faded away.
Well, we've both got a copy.
We probably have. Maybe we're the only people who have a copy.
Another purchase from a new market stall that's opened up is another double vinyl. It's the Frank Zappa guitar album, which just features lots of guitar solos. Yeah. Sort of recorded between 1979 and 1984. We listened to the last track on side one, which was called When No One Was No One.
Great. I mean, Frank made a couple of other kind of all guitar solo albums as well, which are really equally great. So, keeping with Frank, went to his compositions, which made up something called the Yellow Shark, which was actually performed by a really great contemporary classical ensemble called Ensemble Moderne. And he got to hear it just before he died, which was really good, hearing his stuff in that kind of context. I mean, other people have tried to cover his concert music, but not as well as they did, I think, and played the track Outrage at Valdez, which is just an amazing bit of music, I think, actually.
Stunning. John and I are doing our regular monthly session down at the vinyl record shop. What's it called?
Vinyl Head
in Ramsgate tomorrow. Unfortunately, these videos always go out probably as we're in the car on our way down there, so I don't think we're going to see any of you down there. But I think a couple of months ago, I bought this album, which is the Terry Ripdale ECM album called Waves, and we listened to the last track on side 2, which was a very moody and sort of, had a sort of solid drone running throughout it called Charisma, but it was definitely a nice closer.
Yeah, and the final, the ultimate closer was, I think might have shown this record a couple of years ago actually on one earlier video. This was the last recording that Paul Motion put out under his own name, which came out on the German label Winter and Winter. All analogue recording, all the way through the whole chain. Playing with Bill Frisell, a regular companion of Paul Motion, Thomas Morgan, the great bass player, and Charlie Hayden's daughter, Petra Hayden, on vocals, whose voice I really like. Very unaffected voice, really nice sound. And played the track "The Windmills of Your Mind," which is a kind of bit of a classic. 60s originally came out. Was it Nicole Williamson who did the original version of it?
Yeah, but who wrote it? It was
Michel Legrand.
Michel,
yeah. So anyway,
it was in the Thomas Crown affair.
That's right. That's right. Anyway, very nice record. Unfortunately, very expensive.
Ah, there you go.
That's the downside of it.
Well, yes, I will leave a link to the now weekly radio show that I'm doing, called All Points, where you'll hear some of these tunes and many, many others. And also just to say it's been great to see some of the old guard from the VC pop up and celebrate Jonas's 1,000 subscribers. And particularly great to see Anders from Stockholm. And of course Teddy, I notice, has appeared again. As well as our stalwarts like Ben Costello and James Buttery. Let's see what Stavros has to share. And... yeah, see you all very soon.
See you very soon.
Cheers.
Yeah, take care, everyone.